Hello everyone, welcome back to our second episode. Previously we looked at a Metternich system, how Metternich hindered Italian unification. Okay, so here now we are going to look at other factors. You must understand that Metternich alone was not the one who hindered, okay, Italian unification. There were like other factors in play that hindered Italian unification, or is not largely to blame. Okay, so here we are going to look at other factors. One of the factors is the failures of the 1830 revolutions. So it must be noted that in 1830, Europe was experiencing a storm. In my own words, I say it was experiencing a storm. Waliwo storm nga yamanyi, meaning a political storm. People, the oppressed masses, were rising up against what we call the oppressors. For example, in France, there was a revolution against Charles X. Then also in Poland, there was a revolution against the oppressive rule of Russia. Then also in Italy, there was a revolution across the Italian states against what? Oppression. So the failure of the 1830 revolutions, this greatly hindered Italian unification. How? They discouraged, okay, the Italians. They reduced on the morale. Bagwera mudala amanyi. Some even felt like abandoning the struggle. Okay, so with high hopes, okay, that they would be able to overthrow the despotic regimes of Victor Emmanuel I, Ferdinand the First of Naples, Sicily, all those installed puppets, or those installed autocratic leaders. Okay, it wasn't a success. So the Italian unification, the Italian revolution was suppressed. So they were demoralized, hence an obstacle. Another point was high illiteracy, high levels of illiteracy amongst the Italians. So majority of the Italians were illiterate, but most of them couldn't, they had basic elementary education. So advanced topics like nationalism, advanced issues of unity, advanced unity of pan-Italianism, okay, they couldn't understand them, okay, because they were illiterate, and they never saw the benefits. Even some of the newspapers which were published, okay, by Giuseppe Mazzini, such as the Resurrection newspaper, or known as Il Risorgimento, the Il Risorgimento newspaper couldn't be read by an illiterate. Some people were illiterate. I equate this like almost reading a Shakespeare novel to a chimpanzee. It's utterly useless. They couldn't understand. The information was too advanced. While Mazzini was talking about we need to unify, we need to promote pan-Italianism, we need to ensure that we rise up against the Austrian. They couldn't understand, okay? So, in other words, Mazzini's efforts of writing those magazines and newspapers such as the Resurrection or the Il Risorgimento newspaper, it was a spent forth, okay? So this greatly hindered this greatly hindered the spread of nationalism, and this made the Italians unaware, okay, intellectually unaware or unaware about nationalism, hence an obstacle. Then another factor is poor infrastructure, okay. So most of the roads were in a bad state. Roads linking the urban areas as Rome to rural areas such as Sardinia, or rural areas such as Naples, so the roads were in a sorry state. So what happened is nationalists could not easily move, okay? Or even this explains why even the The 30 Italian Revolution was a failure because soldiers could not easily be mobilized. So people could not easily be mobilized because if like such a political movement, for it to succeed, okay, the issue, there must be smooth movement. So these guys could not easily hold their crusades or movements or campaigns, okay, campaigns or what on time easily because of the roads being in a sorry state, hence hindering Italian unification. Another point was the economic the economic crisis or poverty, okay, amongst the Italians. That also was a great factor. So you see that most of the Italians were agrarian, so were agriculturalists, and Italy, most of the Italian states were agrarian states. What does agrarian mean? Agrarian means the reliance on agriculture, okay, and the agriculture that is subsistence, not commercial. Yes, you can rely on agriculture, but the agriculture is what? Commercial, where there is value addition to the agricultural products. But away on the side of Italy, that wasn't the case. Unfortunately, with Italy, that was not the case. So they were purely agrarian with subsistence farming. So this left the Italians very poor, okay? So they couldn't easily, first of all, educate their children, even movement, okay? Movement to other places. While other countries such as Britain were experiencing the Industrial Revolution, Italy was still backward, facing the agrarian, having an agrarian economy, and very poor, and these people could not easily afford money to take their children to school, afford money to attend the meetings of those nationalists, hence an obstacle. Another point was the Congress system, the role played by the Congress system. So the Congress system, as you understand, the Congress system was a series, okay? There was a series of diplomatic meetings, okay, that were held in Europe between 1818 up to 1830, okay? So the periodic meetings that were held during that time, during the time frame of 1818, 1830, was known as the Congress system. So those periodic meetings to solve European problems, okay? So how did the Congress system hinder? Number one, the meetings like of St. Petersburg agreed to do what? To suppress revolutions. Even the Verona 1822 suppress revolutions and the activities of the so-called Carbonari, okay? So even the Congress system agreed to restore those puppets, or known as those aristocrats, okay, who were supporters of Metternich system, which was a large hindrance towards the attainment of Italy's unification. Okay, before we continue, students in most cases try to write independence, okay, that attainment of independence of Italians. I strongly discourage students to write independence, okay, because here it's almost like answering a different question. Students should stick, okay, to continue saying unification, because many people are not aware when Italy got her independence, okay, because you must understand that Italy was under several empires. There was the Roman Empire and different empires, okay, so, and they were already maybe independent, okay, so it had different periods of independence. So I don't encourage students to equate the Italian unification to independence, okay? Students should stick to the question, should stick to the subject of the matter, which is unification. Okay, so another factor that hindered the Italian unification, here we can look at what we call military weakness. Okay, so the military weakness of the Italians greatly hindered their unification. Italians who were weak, most of them used outdated weapons and antiques of the 17th century, such as the cannon guns, okay, the cannon bows, the cannon guns, okay. Others still used the medieval era weapons, probably of the Spartans, like spears, okay. So these were no match to the highly skilled army, okay, of those of Metternich and his puppets, okay. So they were no match to the Austrian army led by Windchigratis, highly motivated, well trained, okay. Uh, you can understand. You remember, for example, when for example, in 1796, when Napoleon led the French to liberate the Italians alongside the nationalists, he found the Italians were bad love, okay. So still at that time onwards, the Italians were poorly equipped. They had poor uniforms, some never had shoes. To make matters worse, they were poorly fed, and there were those diseases such as the influenza diseases, diseases such as the bubonic plague, okay, poorly fed, poorly paid, and all that, okay. So with a poorly skilled army, demotivated, okay, calamity had to reign in the battlefield on the side of the Italians compared to the skilled Austrian army. No wonder those uprisings were brutally suppressed in no time. Like the 1823 uprisings in Italy were suppressed. The 18 to 30 uprisings in Italy were also suppressed. Also the 1848 uprisings were suppressed because the army was weak. So this explains an obstacle, hence an obstacle towards the Italy's unification. Another point is lack of foreign assistance. Okay, lack of foreign assistance greatly hindered Italy's unification. As previously I told you, Metternich had successfully convinced the European powers of no need to interfere in Italy's affairs, as he had become a European statesman. So other European countries such as Britain, despite the fact that these countries were greatly liberal, okay, and were under constitutional monarch, didn't interfere with Italy unification, okay, didn't interfere or didn't help the Italians who were struggling, okay. So in my own words, I said they were portraying double standards, okay. So what happened? So lack of foreign assistance, okay. So from the great powers greatly hindered, okay. So countries like Britain, countries like France didn't interfere. It was not until when when Louis Napoleon III was almost assassinated by who? By Orsini, okay, that France had to intervene later to help the Italians. But before 1848, the European powers were afraid to anger Metternich or to interfere in what we call Italian affairs. So lack of assistance. In my own words, I say, had these European powers assisted the nationalists, like for example, Britain, if it had given them nice, sophisticated weapons, like Britain in the 19th century were the most powerful country on the navy, okay, on the navy, and France, they had the strong army on the land, and they given them at least some assistance military, probably they would have succeeded in attaining their unification earlier. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case before 1848. So the lack of foreign assistance before 1848 by those European powers greatly hindered Italian unification. Then another point is the role played by the Catholic Church and the Pope. Okay, you must understand that Italy, most of the Italian states were Catholic states, and other states we had what we call Papal states, okay, who were under the Pope. Okay, the Pope by then was, I think, probably, was it Pope Pius? Pope Pius either the second or the seventh. Okay, the fourth, Pope Pius, probably Pope Pius the fourth. So what happened? These were strong conservative, okay, and they supported Metternich system, okay. So these were puppets, supported Metternich system, and so no wonder, okay. Metternich was a great friend of Pope Pius the Fourth, and to make matters worse, okay, to make matters worse, he was greatly against the nationalistic activities of the nationalists. So you must understand that the Catholics, they themselves also being conservative, they didn't want to lose power, okay, because they knew that if Italy became unified or became a republic, okay, the Pope would no longer be the leader of the Papal States. So that's why they signed or they aligned with Metternich, who was a great enemy towards Italy's unification. So the role played by the Pope and the Catholic religion greatly hindered, because they were greatly conservative. Then also we can look at another factor of the failure of the 1848 revolution that also greatly hindered Italy's unification. So what happened that in 1848, again, Europe was under storm. There happened revolutions. For example, in France, there was the 1848 revolution. The Orleans monarchy under Louis Philippe was finally overthrown, and another empire came into place of Louis Napoleon III. Who was Louis Napoleon III? He was the nephew of the great Napoleon I. Then later also in Hungary, there was also another revolution. So what happened is that the Hungarians, okay, led by Kossuth, rose up, okay, against the Austrian domination. However, it was suppressed, okay. Though it was suppressed, there were reforms, okay. Then also in Italy, there was also another revolt, okay. And also in Vienna. In Vienna, there was a revolt. This time, Metternich was overthrown, okay. So then also in Italy, there was a revolt. Despite the fact that there was a revolt in Italy, however, this revolt was suppressed. By being suppressed, this further demotivated the Italians. They asked themselves, where did we get wrong, okay? What happened, okay? But however, you must understand that later they learned from the lessons, okay? But still, nevertheless, they were demotivated. Because, so they said, we failed in 1830. Again, we failed in 1848. Why? Okay, so others were demotivated, and hence an obstacle towards what we call Italian unification. Now we are going to look, so here we are looking at other factors, okay? They may ask you, like, to what extent was Austria responsible for the delay of Italy's unification? Here you give a brief introduction about Italy's unification, you give your standpoint, then from there you state, okay, the role played by Austria, so you can be able to reshape or to remodel Metternich's policies in the form of Austria, all right, how they hindered Italy's unification. For example, you say in Austria pursued a strict spy network in some of the states she dominated. As one Italian lady cried out, "My daughter cannot sneeze," Metternich, the emperor of Austria, will hear of it. So there's a way how you phrase Metternich's points in form of Austria, how they hindered. Then on the other side, you look at what other countries, okay? To what extent was Austria? So a candidate is required also to look at other countries. But if they ask you to what extent was Austria's policies, okay? Austria's policies, okay, in the Italian states responsible for the delay in Italy's unification. Here you look at the policies by Austria, okay, then other factors, okay. So students, I encourage you, don't get confused, okay. If they ask you a country specific, look at the role of the country and other countries, okay. So because here it's not good to misfire. You may get excited that you've got 100% or 25 marks, yet you've misfired. So it's always important to look at, to approach the questions properly. So this is known as the QAT, the question approach technique, which is very critical, which is very crucial and very fundamental. So Austria, so we phrase Metternich's policies like in form of Austria. Then after, we look at the role of other countries. So like for the role of Britain, Britain was hesitant in interfering. Britain was hesitant in assisting the nationalists of Italy in nationalists and the Italians in fighting for Italy's unification. Then also you see that Britain was one of the founding members of the Vienna settlement, okay, after the defeat of Napoleon at the Battle of Leipzig, okay. You must recall that Napoleon had been taken to St. Elba. Then later he escaped and ruled France for 100 days and came back. Then later he was defeated at Waterloo and taken at Helena, where he died in 1821 from stomach cancer. But during that period, okay, between 1814 to 1815, with the two defeats of Napoleon Bonaparte, okay, Britain was one of the members of the so-called Vienna settlement, which led to the birth of the Congress system. You must understand, these people agreed that no person from Napoleon's dynasty should ever rule Europe. And you must know that Napoleon Bonaparte somehow contributed to Italian unification by trying to spread the revolutionary catchwords, okay, of liberty, equality, fraternity. Even some of his brothers, such as Lucien Bonaparte, okay, these were able to preach revolutionary catchwords, okay. But with Britain, they made sure that he doesn't do that, okay. That was one of the terms, okay. Also with Britain attending under Lord Castlereagh and later Sir George Canning, what happened, they agreed that revolutions must be suppressed, okay. So this greatly hindered. So Britain should also be blamed, okay, as being one of the hinders, okay. Then also you see that so Britain itself hindered, okay, to give assistance. Then also Britain pursued an isolationist policy, okay. You must understand that Britain, particularly under George Canning and Lord Castlereagh, pursued an isolationist policy, as one of them said that every nation for its own self and God for us all. So isolationists, we are not interested in getting involved in Italian affairs. Yet the Italians were suffering. They wanted somebody to help. Please, mutuyambe to sule dictator, to mutuyambe. Okay? But that isolationist policy hindered. Okay. Then also you look at other countries. Okay, France, the same. Okay, France. How did it also hinder Italian unification? First of all, let us look at from 1815 to 1830. Okay, the restored Bourbon. Okay, leaders. People like Louis XVIII, okay? So France under Louis XVIII was a great ally of Metternich, okay? So he ensured that he must be part of the Vienna settlement. He must be part of the Congress system. Furthermore, you understand that also under Charles X, okay? They were also great allies of Metternich, okay? So furthermore, you see that even with the downfall of those Bourbons or those autocratic leaders, okay? Those autocratic leaders, what happened is that that the next regime of Louis Philippe, okay? For him, he pursued also non-interventionist policy for fear of angering what? Great powers, particularly Britain, as Austria was an ally of Britain. Okay, so France also pursued an isolationist policy under the Orleans monarchy. Then also you see with his downfall, also you see France under Louis Napoleon III also pursued an isolationist policy. It was not until after he had survived that assassination attempt by Orsini that he realized, man, I need to help these guys in the struggle. Okay, so you look at all other different countries, great powers. Okay, how then also Russia's role. You look at the role also played by Prussia. Then also you look at the role played by France, Prussia, and all other countries. Okay, so that is all that you can be able to cover. Okay, then if they ask you to what extent was Metternich, okay, responsible for the delay of Italy's unification, here you look at the role played by Metternich. Okay, then you look at other personalities. So there are personalities who played a positive role and others who played a negative role. Okay, so that is the proper way. Okay, muve kuba kachere ababawa info omufu muje kweno channel tubawe bwino tubasomese nze nafuna distinction 1 ne mukwano gwange ajo batwala naye yafuna muje tubasomese, we guide you. The problem with some schools is that they give students notes, okay, and they pile students with notes. They don't properly guide them, so there is that bridge that is usually there between the student and the teacher, okay, and the knowledge. So the knowledge is lacking. So muje mutwegateko tubawe bwino. We are going to give you tutorials from the French Revolution of 1789 until Cold War politics. Okay, proper question approach. Buli kimu kyonna kyemwetaaga mujayita. You'll pass if you view this channel. Thank you.